panel is to talk to current and former and both current and former student athletes about what it goes into managing that student athlete experience and how they've experienced their mental health journey and how they've experienced these different transitions and tournaments and expectations from a mental perspective. So we're going to get into a little bit of what each of these panelists do to proactively engage with their mental health, in addition to some of the hurdles they may have gone over or some of the experience they may have had that might have deepened their understanding of what mental health is for them and how they want to engage with it for themselves and others. So we're going to go ahead and welcome the panelists. I'm going to introduce them one by one in no particular order. So we're going to start with Stephanie Deschner. Stephanie is a recent Notre Dame University graduate, current M1 student at the University of Kentucky College of Medicine, and a foil fencer from Lexington, Kentucky. As a professional fencer, Stephanie qualified for 3 world teams. As a collegiate athlete, she has 2 national championship titles and received honors for being an NCAA Woman of the Year top 9 finalist, as well as an NCAA Woman of the Year, as well as a NCAA Today's Top 10 award winner. As an undergraduate, she earned a bachelor's degree of science and is continuing to pursue that interest through her medical schooling. Her other interests include hiking and journaling. Welcome, Stephanie. Next, we have Elizabeth Tartakovsky. She is a rising senior at Harvard University and a saber fencer from Livingston, New Jersey. As a professional fencer, Elizabeth has qualified for 5 world teams and won a total of 3 world championship medals. As a collegiate athlete, she is a 2-time All-American and the reigning women's saber national champion. Currently, her undergraduate studies are in the fields of economics and psychology. Her interests include playing the piano, various forms of exercise, and learning about mindfulness. Welcome, Elizabeth. Lastly, Sylvie Bender is a recent graduate of Columbia University, super recent, foil fencer from Armonk, New York. As a professional fencer, Sylvie has qualified for 6 world teams and won 2 world championship titles. As a collegiate athlete, Sylvie has earned 3 All-American honors, and she won the individual championship in 2019, among many other accolades. Just a few days ago, she graduated with her bachelor's in American Studies and Sustainable Development. And likewise, her interests include sustainability, energy, cooking, yoga, and painting. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you for having me, Iman. I'm so excited.
Let's see.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to get straight into the conversation. Just for the audience to know, if you have questions and you would like to provide your questions to us to possibly answer at the end, you can put them in the Q&A tab. It's 2 overlapping question boxes, and we will try to get to them at the end of the session. So let's begin with our kind of general question. This question will be posed to every person in the panel, and they will give us their answers so we can get these different perspectives. So the first question is, how would you describe your mental wellness journey as a student athlete throughout your career? And this can be very specific to the mental component. It could be an overlap between mental and physical. It could be about sports. It could be about academics. It could be about social. But kind of what has that journey been like for you as you've navigated probably the past 15 plus years of your life? We're going to start with you, Sylvie.
Okay, happy to kick it off. I think I speak for all 3 of us, or 4 of us, including Iman, when I say that it's challenging to perform at a high athletic level and also do well in school. And so for me, my mental wellness journey has all been about a balancing act, and determining when I need to take a step back from fixating on either athletics or academics, and focusing on my wellness. So whether that's turning everything off, my phone, my laptop, not going to a single practice that day and rechecking in with myself, getting sleep. I think that going to school and having independence really made me realize that I need to learn those behaviors. So college as a transitional period is all about balance, and finding that.
Thank you, Sylvie. I was happy to be there for some of that as your teammate. And I
Yeah,
see how
no,
much
I love
you
that too.
involved,
It
and
was intense.
I love that as well. Elizabeth, we'll go over to you. What do you think that journey or transition has been like for you, whether it's from high school to college and maybe changing what competitions you're in, what you're studying, and how you're socializing? Like, what has that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, like Sylvie said, it really is a balancing act. I think I think just like among us fencers, we're a pretty high achieving community. So you see everyone, you know, studying really cool things, going to great schools, fencing really well, doing a bunch of extracurriculars. And, from a young age, I just kind of wanted to do everything. Um, so I think the most important thing that I learned was just like Sylvie said, balance. I, make it um a habit like almost every year checking in with myself like, am I enjoying this? Am I enjoying traveling while studying? Am I enjoying what I'm studying? Am I enjoying all these clubs that I joined at school, or is it just kind of like busy work? So really making sure that you're not like overcommitting to things and actually um getting something out of what you're doing, because I'm a big proponent of uh doing something because you're actually passionate about it and not just like for resume building or just because someone wants you to make a world team. Like if it's not in your heart, like you're never gonna it's never gonna be like healthy for you. So yeah, balance, and from the social aspect as well, making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that are supportive, that are like helping you grow. Um because it's once again like the energy you surround yourself with. So really um like this the whole journey like ever since high school has been thinking about everything almost, and learning how to balance it all, how it's contributing to your growth and to your happiness. So yeah, I can definitely get into that a little bit later, but just generally.
Yeah, I really like how you mentioned engaging with things intentionally. And I think one of those big struggles transitioning even maybe different levels in fencing. Like, I don't know if anyone remembers going from being like a Y14 fencer to a cadet, or from a cadet to being a junior or senior. Like, those are like, I think one of my first transitional moments in fencing. But this idea of checking in to see if the things that you are doing or what you actually want to do, and on top of that, understanding what you want to do. I feel like that in itself is a whole journey, trying to figure out what it is that you actually like and what it means for you to like something. But thank you for that. Stephanie, we're going to go over to you. What has your mental wellness journey been like as you've made many transitions through sport and also through academics?
Yeah, I think everything that Sylvie and Elizabeth have said, I definitely agree with. I especially like the idea of intentionality because originally I was starting sports when I was really little. It's the idea is there that you either have mental strength or you don't. You're either strong enough to do it and go through the trials and tribulations of sport and make it through, or you don't. And those who don't get to a certain level, and those who do get to that level. And so I always thought whenever I would fall and start, doubting myself or thinking I'm not good enough to do this, whether that be in school or in fencing, that, oh, well, maybe that just shows that I myself am not strong enough to do this. I never, prior to probably late high school, early college, I never looked at mental health as something that can be trained and grown. Like we're talking about, um, intentionally trying to help your mental health grow with you, right? Like it's it's not something, it's like physical training. It's not something that you can just leave aside and hope it gets better. It's something that you need to actively, and like you're saying, like the whole point of this is to intentionally improve your mental health for when trials and tribulations come about. So I think that's something that's definitely changed my outlook, is that I need to spend time looking in myself, like not just me as a fencer, not just me as a student, but how am I doing as a person? I need to check in with myself. You know, how am I navigating all of this? Am I just being crushed by the weight of school and fencing? Am I getting overwhelmed? Like, am I nervous for what's coming up? How am I dealing with it? I learned that I had to take a step back from my various identities and all of the expectations that come with those, and really check in with myself and work on that side of myself away from all of the facets of my life, in order to be the best version of myself in those different facets. And it took me a while to realize that I actually had to take a step back and put intentional work into that. Otherwise, it was not going to be sustainable in other aspects of my life. So I think just really being intentional about yourself as a person and recognizing that that's the foundation for everything else, and being mentally well as that foundational self helps in every other aspect of your life.
Amazing. I kind of love it. It almost ties in a lot with what Elizabeth said. And also, Sylvie, when you talk about taking a step back from your various identities, almost identities that have been placed onto you or given to you as you're growing up, and your parents just say, do this and do that, and they take you places and you just are along for the ride, and checking in with yourself, as well as, you know, with Elizabeth talking about intentionality and Sylvie talking about this idea of balance, being able to find that intentional self and then figuring out the things you are able to balance. Like you said, you can't do maybe to the same degree every part of yourself, but figuring out the parts that you want to invest in today, and maybe those are different tomorrow. But that was that was amazing. We're gonna move into the next question. That was a great kind of overview and introduction to you all. This is another general question, meaning that every panelist is going to answer this one from their own perspective. So the question is, can you describe a challenging experience as a student athlete and how you were able to either get through it or overcome it? I think people talk a lot about overcoming challenges as this idea of maybe there was an obstacle and you succeeded in getting over it. But I think oftentimes it's also when you can't get over about an obstacle, or when you just struggle through something, that too is also an overcoming situation. Being able to be okay with yourself and relearn yourself or understand yourself again after maybe failing or struggling at something is also, I think, a valuable thing to talk about. So we're going to start again with you, Sylvie. Just maybe describe a challenging experience and how you're able to either just simply get through it or possibly, you know, overcome it.
Sure. So not every fencer is going to be making world teams. Everybody's goals are going to be different. So I'm going to speak to an experience that's a little more universal as an athlete and as a student athlete. So I obviously was on the Columbia fencing team, and fencing as an individual sport inherently always appealed to me, but I was very excited to be on a team going into college. Not every single person on your fencing team is going to be your best friend. And oftentimes interpersonal conflict arises. And so I had one of those situations where I, love fencing and I love going to practice, but I don't love interacting with some people that I'm around. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. And oftentimes it can take a toll on your mental health, right? Like fencing is something that's supposed to be grounding, that's supposed to be motivating and like identify you or me in this case. And ultimately, like what I would suggest if anybody's having conflict with people as it relates to their athletics in school is give it time and to find people that you do vibe with. Because again, like truly not every single person needs to be your best friend. Not every single relationship needs to be life-changing. And so I guess my point being, a challenging situation doesn't have to define fencing for you, especially if it's a social one. And that time really does heal all, and to not worry that this is going to be what the culture and the environment is, especially in intercollegiate athletics forever. It takes time to change.
Thank you for mentioning that. I know I've spoken to a lot of younger athletes and even peers about almost like toxic training environments. And I think something that we can all relate to, having been in athletics for a long time. Not everyone is great at regulating themselves and their emotions or being mindful of the emotions of other people. And not everyone kind of grew up in an environment or with the mentality as a fencer that being a good teammate or being mindful of others is an important part of fencing. Some people, particularly in individual sports, are taught that, it's you against everyone in every aspect of it. And I think, I think having that realization that there are people who you might be around a lot who don't give you the best energy forces you almost to also reflect on what does give you the good energy, who does make you feel supported. How can I shift my attention maybe off of this thing that doesn't make me feel great and onto the thing that does make me feel great? Or for some people, how do I shift my situation so I'm no longer engaged with this thing that's making me feel good? But I think that's like super relevant for a lot of people who either, are in situations where they have to be around people you don't always like. And that is for school, that's for sports, that's for life in general. But thank you so much for kind of getting into that like other component, that social component of this thing that we call student athlete, but there is that social and community component to it. Elizabeth, we're gonna move to you to kind of get your insight. What is a challenge or an obstacle or difficulty that you face, and how did you either overcome it or simply, get through it?
Yeah. So my general challenge, pretty general thing, but it's just those moments where I touched upon this in the previous question, but where you kind of want to achieve everything, want to do everything, and just the thought of everything you need to do gets really overwhelming. So personally, for me, freshman year of college was really difficult. Socially, I wanted to make a lot of friends. Academically, I wanted to succeed in a new environment. With fencing, I wanted to, continue to achieve on the junior level, the senior level, fence for my team. So I was thinking about a lot of things. And I felt like I was slowly losing my grasp of everything, because instead of really like being present and enjoying everything, I kind of wasn't able to just like focus on one thing at a time. I would get very overwhelmed by all of these thoughts. And so like one piece of advice I got was that no one ever expects you to be the best fencer, the best student, the best girlfriend, boyfriend, the coolest, most social person. Like if you were able to do that, like you would get some kind of world prize. Like, so I think that kind of, and that's advice I got from my own sister, who also inspires me a lot. And just hearing that, knowing that like doing your best is what's most important, and really trying to stay present, that's kind of what got me through. And I think that some tangible things I learned since freshman year was really like sacrificing some things like a day of practice or you know time to rest and relax. But like one thing you don't sacrifice is like your mental health and your sleep. So for me, I just like really started to learn how to build a routine, like build in a stable sleep schedule, build in some time to meditate, to breathe, to do any like mindful activity like walking. It's just a way that like I learned to just like build it into my daily life, so that when those really stressful, overwhelming moments do hit, um I'm just like a lot more observant of what I'm feeling. Like I don't give power to those feelings, and I just like um feel more in control of myself in those moments. So um yeah, just making mental health a routine and a priority for myself.
I really like kind of a nuanced thing that you said when you said when those things hit. And I think it connects some to what Stephanie was talking about viewing your mental health as a journey and a growing, developing component of your life, and not just something that you can push off to the side. Because, it's not like same thing with physical injury. We could do everything right, and you could walk down the sidewalk and sprain your ankle because you stepped on a rock. Quite literally, very possible, but just something weird happens and now you're injured. And I think this idea of viewing your experiences and your mental health as not trying to do things to completely prevent anything bad from ever happening to you and you ever feeling bad ever, but being of the mindset of let me best prepare myself and make my day-to-day as great and as possible, and also have the ability to understand and be more resilient almost when those challenging times come, because I have this great awareness of the things that do make me feel good when I'm feeling bad and how I normally feel in general. So I love that. And when you said, one thing you don't sacrifice your mental health and your sleep, I feel like a lot of young athletes need to hear that, because it's kind of opposite of the messaging that sometimes we get from our peers. We got Stephanie, back to you. What is kind of something you've overcome, something you've gone through maybe that you might want to share with us?
Yeah, and just to harp on the sleep, please get your sleep, please get naps in. It is the most important thing you could do. It has gotten me through a lot of problems. So that's, to start off, I completely agree with you. The hardest thing I've probably faced in my career so far is similar to Elizabeth. It was my freshman year of college, and my results in fencing and my results in school didn't just take a dip, they took an absolute plunge to the depths. I went from fencing wise, I went from trying to qualify for teams to barely being on the points list. And in school, it was very much a struggle to maintain the grades that I so easily got, or not so easily, but I, got fairly, with the work, I could get good grades. And in college, it felt like I put in a lot of work to no avail for a while. And it was heartbreaking, and it really put me in a very dark space. And I had to step back, and I realized I was having a bit of an identity crisis, because as I said earlier, prior to this time, I'd always kind of had a reactive sense of mental health, and it was based on my two identities of being a fencer and being a student. And my idea of mental health is like, okay, if one thing's going bad, the other thing's going fine, so I'm okay. That part of my identity is okay, so the other one will come around eventually. And in this part of my life, in my first semester, neither was happening. In fact, both were kind of compounding each other to get worse and worse. And then in the process of all of that, I had found how much I used comparison as a way to make myself feel better. In the past, throughout high school, I could compare myself against other students, and I was doing better than them, so I'm okay. Or, okay, I'm doing better than this or this fencer, so I'm doing okay. And in my first semester of school, I was doing immensely poorer than the other students in pre-med, and I was doing much more poorly than my peers in fencing. And so I just thought I was an awful person, that I hit my max in fencing in school. I remember calling my parents, telling them that I'm not going to become a doctor, I'm not smart enough, and thinking that I just need to retire from fencing because I have reached my peak. I reached my peak in high school, I peaked early, and that happens to some fencers, and that's what it is. It was not a good place to be. So I really had to take a step back and talk with my family and some of my close longtime friends. And a big resource was sports psych. Highly recommend sports psychology if you can get involved in it in any way, or just psychiatry in general. They offer great insights. And something that came out of that was realizing that my locus of control was very external, and I wasn't focusing at all on what I could actively do to help myself get better. I had a very stagnant mindset, thinking that my attributes were fixed. My intelligence was fixed. My fencing ability was fixed. And I didn't know when that peak would be reached, but when it was reached, I would be over. And I thought that at that moment, I had reached my peak and there was no growing beyond it. That's just not true. Attributes are not fixed. I'm sure everyone has heard of a growth mindset, and it's a funny joke amongst me and my friends because our freshman year we had a like longitudinal like intro to college course that harped on growth mindset, so it got kind of funny, but it is true. Like there is no attribute that can't continue to grow. And the biggest thing about growth though, and this is where comparison comes in, it's on your own timetable. Like you can't look at who's next to you on your right or left and compare their rate to yours. What matters is that you just keep going forward at whatever rate that is. It can be very slow, it can be a crawl, or it can be, sometimes you can just blast forward and that's great, but it's going to be at your own rate. So I really needed to come back to myself, not myself as a fencer, not myself as a student, not myself as all of these other things that I used as a way to get away from my personal self, and regain what can I do right now to improve my studies? What can I do to improve fencing? And also like reframe goals to more accessible ones, making teams or ultimately winning things or winning competitions and these big goals, they're good, but a lot of that is out of your control. What is in your control? Am I giving 100% in this bout? Am I, moving as much as I want? Am I working hard? Am I, if I wanted to work on false counterattack barrier post, am I doing that properly in the bout? And in school, am I using the resources provided for me? Am I using tutors? Is this study strategy not working for me, but I'm being stubborn, so I don't want to try something else? Well, I need to try something else because it's obviously not working. It's those little things that regain that internal control that helps the spiral into hopelessness of I'm never getting out of this. I'm just useless. I'm not smart. I'm not athletically gifted enough. You are. And sometimes it just takes a reframing of a mindset to get out of that hole. And it took me a while, and it's an ongoing process. I'm nowhere near finished and I won't ever be finished. But I think in those challenging times, taking a step back and reminding myself, okay, let's get rid of all of the noise around me, of what everyone else is doing, of what I expect of myself, what everyone else expects of myself. Let's get it back to tangible goals, tangible things that I can change and fix. And how can I improve upon that? And I think that really helped me through that really challenging time and, series of less challenging times from then.
Woo! You got me. I'm not gonna lie. I was crying just a little bit because you hit me in my,
series of
in my emotions. Sorry. You hit me in my emotions because I feel like I related to a lot of what you said. And I think one of the challenging ones is growing up. When you talked about being a student and an athlete as like two parts of your identities, and then one was doing poorly and the other one was going well, that was okay. I thought I was crazy because I was like, there's like social, there's academics, and there's fencing. And like, I'm not the best at being social. Like, I'm not the most popular. And like, I am like smart, but I don't think I'm like a genius. But like fencing, like I win stuff. So like as long as everything's cool and like it's okay. And then when one of those things, two of them aren't going well, you just feel devastated. And this idea of like being able to shift your mindset into one that works for you, I feel like is one of the strings between what you were saying when you had these external expectations and external references and these really large goals that had a lot of external influences versus shifting it down to what is something that I can make my goal now and kind of ensure that I can achieve. You can't necessarily get the grade, but you can understand the content and you can answer like a empirical, like fact-based question correctly. Or maybe you won't win the match, but you can either try to make the parry post or not. You can set up the action, you can go for it every time. But I think that was like very powerful what you said. And I like I said, I related to it a ton with this idea of being able to shift and connect to what Elizabeth said, really personalizing your perspective on your own life for your advantage versus kind of being weighed down by these external occurrences and expectations and this reference of what I should be doing and how I am doing versus just doing and then seeing how you're enjoying it. Yeah. But thank you. I appreciate, and I hope the people watching also appreciated that. We're going to move into like specific questions now. So each panelist is going to get a question that's a little more specific to their background or their identities to provide perspectives on that. So Sylvie, we're going to start, and kind of the topic that Sylvie's going to expand on is major decisions and transitions. We all touched on transitions earlier, but I think that something that we all have experienced but have not yet really gone into is these really big decisions that we have to start making. You know, college maybe for a lot of people is like the first really big decision, but then you go into college and there's so many more big decisions that you have to make in terms of how you're going to spend your time and how you're going to, you know, dedicate yourself. So I'm asking Sylvie, you know, what was the experience like? You know, you took a year off or a semester off to compete and train for the Olympic trials. How was the experience both leaving school and making that decision, being in that period, and then also coming back into school? I think something that we don't, or a lot of athletes or younger athletes don't think about is it's not simply like fencing stops at a certain point, or the way in which you fence it stops. So maybe being a student athlete stops, or being a student stops, or being an athlete stops for you. And that's a major moment. And so I think to go out of that and then to come back into that is something that a lot of us probably will never experience, or only a few people experience going in and out of something. So yeah, Sylvie, I would love for you to expand upon that.
Sure. So let's give you all some context. So going into the 2020 Olympic trials, I was intending on not taking a year off. And my goal was eventually to try for the 2024 Olympics. But then everything changed when I made my first 16 in a senior World Cup about halfway through the season. And suddenly I was in moonshot contention for the Olympics. And it was a really tough decision to make. You know, do I abandon school and give it everything? Do I find a balance? Do I not try and just keep going on my original goal of 2024? And ultimately I had to decide within like a week. So it was a very short term turnaround goal, which again is mentally challenging. I decided to take the minimum number of courses at Columbia that I could, and I took very easy classes, pass failing one of them, and then really just dedicating like 20, 30 hours a week to practicing, finding a balance that I felt that I could like sit with and be comfortable with. And for each person, each decision, it's going to be different. But I'm really proud of the way that I just kind of tried to find a balance between not sacrificing school, which means so much to me, and my community here, and also, you know, giving it what I could with fencing. Ultimately, I didn't make the team, obviously, which is fine. And I'm also glad that I stayed in school, because the pandemic happened about 4 months into my journey. As it did for all of us. I had to then completely stop fencing after fencing for 20 or 30 hours a week, which again is another transition. And suddenly my body was not moving at all in the ways that I was, and in the pathways I was forming. And I came back to school this year as a senior after taking a gap year, deciding that for me, it was the best decision to not do online school. And it was better to just take a rest from everything and reevaluate when I got back what was best for me. And this is not necessarily related to your question, Iman, but the pandemic did have like a crazy impact on a ton of people, a lot of athletes included. And I really had to think about what the role I want fencing to be in my life. And I decided that, for me, fencing is all about the community that I've like grown to love and, live with and travel with. And so I really only did things this year that made me happy as it relates to fencing. Some of that, includes traveling to World Cup and to NACS, but I really focused on the NCAA circuit because it brought me so much happiness. And without the pandemic and without that break, I don't think I would have been able to check in with myself. And it's hard to artificially manufacture those breaks throughout your career. And I think it was Elizabeth that said that she does kind of yearly check-ins with herself as to whether she's enjoying this or not. And I really would encourage that as well, figuring out what it is exactly you want out of fencing. Because coming from my perspective, having, trying it all, fencing on a really high level, fencing on a collegiate level, which is also taxing in a very different way, and then fencing for fun or not fencing at all. It's important to figure out when you want what, and to not push yourself to do things that you don't necessarily want to do, because at the end of the day, it's your life and you have to figure out what you want from it.
Yeah, I think mentioning the pandemic was, the period of time during the pandemic where there was no competition or really no ability to train is definitely related. And sorry, I think that you talk a lot and you mentioned a lot of those like bigger and smaller decisions, or having how that decision that you made opened your idea to these other decisions that you could make. And then the smaller decisions within it. So like fencing or no fencing, but then it's like, okay, how do I want to engage with fencing? How much fencing? Fencing with who? Fencing where? So it kind of opened, it stopped this automatic trap of I am a fencer and I go to every tournament that I can go to and I train as much as I can train, to what are my actual goals here? And then how can I reflect that in my time and my energy? And I think that's really, really important for a lot of athletes, because for sometimes some people comes, in high school, some people comes as you're going into college, some people it comes after college, but not just saying, okay, I do this, but why do I do this? And how do I want to do this? And I think also when you talked about like, are you actually enjoying this? Parents will tell you, and it's true, some things that you want for yourself are not going to be enjoyable. But to be critical about how much is it taking from you and how much is it giving you. So if you're fencing and you don't maybe think you would ever make a world team, or that's not really even your goal, but you're spending all your time doing it, and maybe you have social difficulties there, or you have training difficulties and you're injuring yourself left and right, are the not likable things about it and the taxing things about it balancing out with the things that you do like about it and that you are trying to get from the situation and the things that are giving to you. And the third kind of hidden factor is there something else that you could be doing with the same time that would have better metrics, that would be taking less from you and giving more to you, but you didn't think about that one? A lot of us fencers haven't. A lot of us student athletes haven't thought about what are we actually giving up by training 40 hours a week or training 20 hours a week? Is there something else that we actually could be doing that would be giving into us more and taking away from us less? But yes, so thank you so much for kind of highlighting that, unique experience of yours, and kind of the different facets of it, and how that changed your relationship with kind of like decision making and fencing. The next specific question that we have is going to go to Stephanie, and it's the super student athlete question. I love super student athlete. All of us are super student athletes because we've all competed both professionally, and I say professionally with a lot of intention, because the amount of time and the events that we go to and the things that we do are that of professional athletes. In any other sport, it would be called being a professional athlete. And so that's, what I call it. But being, what's it like managing now professional school and professional athletics, being in a doctorate medical program and also competing in that kind of senior circuit? What, can you talk about maybe expectations of yourself or from other people, maybe stress, sacrifice, management, and even, joy in that balancing balancing experience?
Yeah, for sure. I think everything that Sylvie said is so important in my own journey as well, for how much is each thing that I'm involved in taking from me, and how much at this moment can I give to school and to fencing. Because like you said, Iman, and I'm so glad you did, it is like having two jobs. It really is. And I think what I always tell people that ask me, what's it like fencing in med school or in grad school, whatever, postgraduate, basically, compared to college, is for the first time in my life, being a student athlete, I only hold that identity. Other people in my life do not give me that identity. There's no such thing as this hybrid student athlete. According to medical school, I'm a medical student and fencing is a hobby. And as a hobby, it is not something that they think I would do to the extent that I do. Like it's something I do on the side when I have time and make sure it doesn't, get away from med school. And then fencing has not changed at all. Fencing, you still need to do a certain amount to maintain ranking. You still need to train a certain amount. And so it's very hard. And it was hard for me at the beginning because I didn't feel a lot of gratitude or appreciation from either side. I felt like each side was taking a lot from me and not giving a lot back. It was like, oh, you just traveled to this other country and you just took 2 exams to make up that you missed. Oh, but make sure you don't miss going to the hospital for 5 to 10 hours to go watch this surgery. And I was like, but I just did all these things. Are you not proud of me? And they're like, well, that's your choice. And that's really hard. And I mean, you get a little bit of it in college for sure. But in medical school, a lot of people just really don't understand what it's like to be an athlete. There's very few. I mean, there's some people who are Division I athletes and understand that, but fencing is even its own thing because most of us, not most of us, but some of us still like travel internationally and do all that stuff. And fencing is hard. But I think, again, an important part was valuing myself and realizing I'm not going to get the appreciation or the gratitude from those 2 spheres for everything I was doing combined, but I could be proud of myself and reward myself and take time for myself, like be my own biggest cheerleader, because that's not something I had ever really tried to do in the past. I hadn't really needed to because at Notre Dame, which is a big sports school, so I can't really speak to the experience at Ivy's, but if you came back and like you won ACCs or you won NCAs or you did well at a meet or whatever, it's like, oh my gosh, you guys are on the fencing team. It was like kind of a joke, but kind of a real thing that like, oh, you guys are super accomplished. So there was that kind of like air of, yeah, I'm this thing, which isn't given at med school. It's like, oh, you're traveling, that's kind of stupid. This is really hard to do with all the stuff that we're required of. So it isn't the same appreciation. It's just like, you're really dumb for trying to do this. So I learned that, and this is something I wish I had done earlier in college, is learning to be your own cheerleader, because people's praise and people's like awe at you trails and goes away. But if you're your own biggest cheerleader and take time for yourself to say, you are doing something that is really hard, and I am really proud of me. I am really proud of all of the things I'm doing. I think it just helps to get through the hard times. And for instance, like that's what's gotten me through getting back from this massive long smushed World Cup circuit because of COVID, and getting back from Korea and having to take 2 exams, give 2 presentations, and then having to do more next week. Med school doesn't care that I was in Korea, and fencing didn't care that I had all this stuff afterwards, but I did. And I was really proud of myself that I was able to schedule my time and get through all of it. And also, like Sylvie said, sometimes it's about just stepping back and realizing, again, like what Elizabeth said earlier, you have to check in with yourself and see, where am I at? Is my tank at 0%? Because you can't give to anything at that point. And I really had to do that almost weekly at this point, of saying, okay, where is my energy and where can I give my energy? My biggest thing is always make a planner and try to make a schedule the week before. That's a fantastic way to figure out how to schedule your energy output, really. So like if I have a few exams that week, that's going to take my energy and that's required of me. So maybe I need to back down on practice or just go in for a lesson or something like that. Or maybe I have an easier week in school so I can give more energy to fencing, or I have a big competition coming up, so I need to give a little bit more to fencing. So I think checking in with myself and realizing where I need to give and take helps a lot. I think that's easier post-grad because college schedules are a little bit more fixed in training. But I think even in college, talking with your coaches and seeing when you have nothing left to give, you can't help your team as much anymore. So checking in with yourself has been really helpful for me, being my own biggest cheerleader, I would say. And again, not falling into a comparison trap, because medical school is like you put a bunch of type A people on steroids all together in a room and say go. So not trying to compare to how much research are they involved in compared to how much research am I involved in, who shadowed who knows who, like it's just all over the place. You hear it all the time when you go into school. But stepping back and realizing that my situation is unique and I can't compare my journey to theirs because it is unique. So those are the things that have gotten me through this year. I definitely have not done it perfectly, but it's been a rewarding year because I think I've really grown in being proud of myself, which isn't something I've let myself do before, but it's helped me get through a lot of struggles in a year and a lot of long nights of studying.
Yeah, I think this idea of identifying success for yourself, and it's like a really big and important step. And I think people probably do it throughout their entire 20s and even beyond. Taking ownership of your life is like this kind of underlying concept. So it's like you're not fencing for mom and dad or for coach or for whatever. Like you were the one fencing, it has to somehow be about you. Or you're going to medical school, you're trying to be a doctor. That experience is not, no one else is doing that experience. You have to really be able to say, okay, if this is for me, if this is something that I'm doing, whether it's for you because you want to do this for someone else, but it has to really come down to how am I personalizing and taking ownership of my own life experience and not allowing other people's perspectives on that, or being like, you're amazing, or like, you're dumb, or, you know, all these different stuff, not allowing that to influence your personal relationship with your own life experience. Yeah. We're going to wrap up with the last question, and then we're going to open up for a short Q&A. If you want to start asking any questions, please go to the overlapping dialogue icon and submit your questions so we can get to it. This is a question about proactive mental health. So can you name one or maybe two proactive mental health tactics that you have developed or that you use currently in your mental health journey? So Sylvie, we will start with you. What's kind of one or two ways that you proactively invest and engage with your mental health?
Yeah, so I would love to highlight what Natalie V did in the past hour. I am not as much of an expert as she is, and I highly recommend anybody reaching out to her if you're interested in yoga and breathing. But throughout the pandemic, I became increasingly interested in yoga and its ability to make my mind and my body feel so much better after even just 30 minutes, 20 minutes of focused energy. I feel definitely more ready to do everything that once overwhelmed me. And so that is definitely a proactive technique that enhances my mental health. I also know that this mind-body connection is so apparent in my body, like when for example, chronic pain in my hip or my back hurts, my mental health suffers as well. So yoga has really helped me kind of maintain my flexibility, but also just my peace of mind and my sanity. So I highly recommend it for others.
Awesome. Yoga and the mind-body connection. Elizabeth, what's maybe one or two ways that you proactively, Elizabeth, I think I forgot your specific question.
I mean, I know we're short on time, so I'm happy to answer anything.
Okay, so both I want you to talk about one or two ways you practically engage your mental health, and then also talk about, the ways that you engage in your community and yourself in terms of mental health. So kind of, I call it the commonwealth and wellness. So you could talk a little bit about that, because I feel like they kind of overlap a little bit.
Yeah, I think to answer the commonwealth and wellness question, in general, I think with being on a team or being parts of, different teams on college campus, I think I've learned how can I kind of benefit myself and others in terms of, our mental health. And I think that what you inspired me to do actually, Mon, is like actually being vocal and sharing about your own like struggles and experiences. I think like as a captain, this is my first time being a captain on the fencing team this past year. Something I tried to do was like having the bravery to initiate the conversation, like about like your own struggles, to let people know that like this is a place where you can say like, I failed the test the other day, I cried myself to sleep, whatever, to know that like, you know, everyone is human, everyone struggles, everyone's, worried about themselves. And I think that's helped me a lot with like um taking like not giving all of those things power. Like I'm okay to talk about my struggles, and hearing other people kind of like giving people the space and hearing them like reciprocate that um just helps you, it helps to show you that like everyone really has their own journey, and there's no use in comparing, because like everyone has kind of starts at different levels and deals with it in their own way. So that's my question, that's my answer for that. And in terms of how to be proactive about mental health, it's really, for me, it's been a journey of building like a mental health routine. Like I mentioned before, whenever life hits you in the moment, it's really hard to just tell yourself, okay, calm down. Like, how are you going to calm down when, everything's going on? So, for me, just like, meditating, mindfulness, um, uh, an example is that I wake up every day and I try to like do some breathing exercises, or like a 5 minute, 10-minute meditation, whatever it is. Um, Doing that every day, setting that goal so that you're more resilient to all those overwhelming feelings that might come. And I think that for me,